Okay, ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Okay, this was report number 46 for COVID-19, published on the 6th of March, and report number 47 published on the 7th of March. Okay, now 6th of March, the 5th of March, you had 95,333 cases worldwide. Next day, 98,192. And the next day, of course, more than 100,000. 101,927. So you're seeing again, well, you're seeing actually more than a 1% increase per day in the cases worldwide. It's not actually crept up that much, because as the China cases have gone down in terms of rate of increase, the world cases have gone up to meet them. So now you've got 80,000 cases in China, you've got 100,000 in the world, so you've got 21,000 cases in the rest of the world outside of China. Notice 400 deaths, 78 new deaths outside China, but just 28 new deaths inside China. 3,600 new cases outside China, probably very underestimated because of Iran, which could have 1 million cases by now. Only 102 new cases inside China. So it could well be that the Chinese are maybe getting control of this disease, and it's moved to the rest of the world. It's going to be much, much worse in the rest of the world, I think, than in China, to be quite honest. And when you actually look at the number of cases you've got in some countries now, you're into the many hundreds and even the several thousands for Korea. Then Japan is increasing. Singapore is actually starting to increase again. Then Europe, well, Italy is skyrocketing. Germany and France and Spain have skyrocketed actually just recently. And the UK is also starting to get into some trouble. Loads and loads of countries now in the 100 club. Thailand, 48 cases. I just don't believe that, because there have been plenty of evidence that people fled through Thailand to get out of China when the travel ban was on from China. There's been an enormous increase in the viral pneumonia cases in Thailand, so from their medical website, from their state website. So it's all just being called viral pneumonia, I think. Iran, 4,000 cases, 124 deaths. I mean, that's 3%. But I mean, who knows, really? Members of the government have got it there. You wouldn't have thought that if there were a few cases, members of the government were there, would have caught it. Then you've got USA, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who's on CNBC and other stations in the US, often says they've got low thousands of cases already, not 213. Okay, so where are we? The ship, one or two have been transferred from the ship, so it's gone just below 700. Been put under other countries' classifications. Now you have a large amount of local transmission now. Okay, so for the countries outside China, you've got a lot of local transmission. Not that, and on the ones where you've only got one case, you've got imported cases right down at the bottom of the list. And very interesting one here is in Europe. The Holy See, Vatican City. One would wonder, is that the Pope? The Pope has a cold, they're telling us. The Pope has a cold. Very interesting. That's what they said about the Russian leaders just before they died in the early 80s. I mean, that was a famous thing Yuri Andropov and Chernenko both had colds shortly before they died, which is why they never appeared at the May Day celebrations when they used to have those huge military parades. So let's have a look. 101,000. Okay, you can see the rate of increase is about 1% a day or so. Okay. Let's have a look. Actually, that's not the rate of increase. The rate of increase is the bold. The rate of increase is now 3% a day. Now you notice actually the world cases, the global cases back here, were going up about 2 or 3% a day, and then they went down, sometimes below 1%. And then they started to increase again because of the cases outside China. Before then, the world figures were completely dominated by China, with huge daily increases in bold black there. Okay, now let's have a look at China. China in yellow. Okay, 80,000 cases in China. So that's the number of cases, that's the number of new cases, and the next is the percentage change in new cases. And we're down to, well, 0.2% in China, whereas it used to be 10%, 20%, okay? And here's my forecast. My forecast actually for China is that it would have reached 83,000 by now, so they're below my forecast. My forecast is on the right there. My total forecast for China at the moment is standing at 85 by the time the epidemic stops. As you can see, it stops at 85,900. So there's potential for them to have even fewer than that in total. But of course we don't know how many people weren't counted in Wuhan city. A British government document says that 20% of the population there might have been infected, which could be over 1 million people. Here we are with the world cases. The world cases showing 21,110. A very, very rapid increase. Going up, this is how many cases it's going up, okay? And for some reason I've duplicated that column to check it, but this is the percentage rate of increase. I mean, it's 16 to 20+% per day, every day, and the number of deaths is increasing very fast as well, at 20 to 30% per day. The number of deaths, this is number of deaths, that's the new deaths per day, this is the increase in percentage terms per day. That's disastrous. This is the number of cases in the world outside of China, excluding the ship. Okay, and that shows an almost perfect exponential rise, by the way. Okay, here we have the total deaths, total world deaths and total Chinese deaths, and they're moving away from each other now because you've got 400 deaths in the rest of the world. And again, the deaths were increasing slower and slower and slower worldwide, and now they're starting to creep up again to 3% a day from about 1 point something% a day at the lowest. Where were we? 1.9, 1.6. Okay, and if you go to the China deaths, the China deaths are decreasing in percentage terms here, just going to 1% a day, and you're getting about 30 new deaths a day, and you're at 3,000. Remember, the rest of the world is at 3,400 now. So the Chinese forecast I have for new deaths, okay, 3073, my forecast is saying 3120 for today, okay, so goes to 3493 by the time it stops. So if they eradicate the disease, they'll have 3,400 deaths, and whatever I said for the case is 88,000, 86,000 cases. Okay, let's go up and have a look. Wuhan. Okay, those are the three. That's Hubei province, that's China, that's the world. Let's have a look at Hubei province, where things were really very, very, very bad before. Total cases, increase per day, constantly going down. Percentage increase in Hubei province, has gone down below 0.1% per day, whereas it's about 20% a day in the rest of the world. That's why I say China is doing far better than the rest of the world. This is a couple of the Chinese provinces. This is Guangdong. Apparently virtually no increase in cases. Beijing, Shanghai, very small increases in quoted cases. Next comes Japan. Cases going up, but not as madly as in some parts of the rest of the world, but still about 10% per day. Still about 10% a day. Cases in South Korea. Now this is interesting. This is why I've started to forecast South Korea. Still going up quite fast, hundreds of cases a day. That's the total in thousands. That's the new cases per day. But the percentage is falling fairly consistently. So I've started to forecast South Korea. My forecast percentage change was 6.7 against 7.7. My forecast was 432 new cases against 483, which was for real. And it was saying 10,000 cases altogether. So it looks like they might be in for 10 to 12,000 cases if they continue that sort of rate of decline. Now let's have a look at Italy. I started forecasting for Italy, but unfortunately the forecast has since been exceeded by the last 3 days of percentage changes in cases. So the number of cases have jumped faster than my forecast. I said the forecast on my other video was probably too early to call. So, and I had a total, I was looking at a total of 18,000 cases for Italy. So it looks like it's going to be over 20,000 cases. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a little look at the graphs and see what happens. USA up, Germany up very sharply. I'm going to have to start looking at Germany and see if that's a true exponential increase. I'm sure it is. The UK starting maybe an exponential increase. The ship, the Diamond Princess, have taken 1 or 2 cases off that and put them with another country, with the home country. Obviously they've just they'll probably reassign them like they reassigned the 4 cases to the UK. Germany, as I said, increased very fast. Okay, that wasn't Germany. This one here was another country. Let's see which country that was. That was France, actually. France next to the UK. So France is going exponential. Germany is going exponential. Very similar to France, actually. Freedom of movement of people is going to ravage Europe. So you had 103% day-over-day increase in Germany, with 272 new cases the day before, on top of the 262 that there were the day before that, making 534. So you had 103% increase. It's gone down to 20, but it's very unstable figures at the moment. Iran, 4,700 cases. Well, you know, the increase there daily is between 20 and 50%, but nobody knows how many cases there are in Iran, since some politicians have been hit, and I think at least one has died. There could be hundreds of thousands of cases there. The leadership are not going to get this if the people haven't got it in enormous numbers. So let's just zoom back a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a look at a few graphs and add a couple of points to the graphs and see how this changes the graphs. So this is China cases, global cases, Hubei cases, and rest of China cases. So let's add the last 2 or 3 days data to this. And you'll see the world cases pulling away further from the China cases. So you're going to see those pull away now. They're going to pull away ever more sharply. And you know, this really shows you you're going to have a global pandemic of this thing. Okay, let's have a look. 54. I'm sure I might be able to do this on a macro, but there you have. This is the rest of the world cases here, because this is global, this is China. So this is outside China. There are more cases outside China now than there are in the provinces outside of Hubei. Here's Hubei, levelling off very nicely. China levelling off very nicely. So you've got this S-curve here, with the exponential increase, the linear increase, and then the falling off. And you can see quite plainly, really, that this part of the graph, which was the end of January in Hubei and China, is resembling this part of the graph at the beginning of March for the rest of the world. So you're going to have a huge, another huge S-curve for the rest of the world. And you could get one of those in every single country. Okay, so there are going to be multiple curves like this in the rest of the world. They could all be any size. I mean, the China one is going to come out, as I said, about 85,000 cases altogether. Who knows what this one is going to go to? Okay, because remember that Wuhan was quarantined. Wuhan was quarantined around about here. Day 4 was the 24th of January. Are we quarantining the rest of the world here at this point? Because even though Wuhan was quarantined, you still went from a few thousand to 80,000 cases. And we're already past 10,000 cases for the rest of the world now. In fact, we're already at 20,000, because each of these lines is 20,000. So things are really, really strengthening now. Okay, things are really, really strengthening in the rest of the world. If you look at, let's have a look at this one. This is daily rates of change in China for deaths. Okay, I think actually I can go to 55, 0.55, yes I can. Let's have a look at 55. Okay, you'll see those are continuing on down. And this forecast started way back here in mid-February. And it's still been on that forecast line the whole time, even as you go into early March. So it's a consistent fall in the daily rate of change of cases, and a consistent fall, although slower, in the daily rate of change of deaths, down to 1% a day for the deaths, and getting close to 0.1% a day for the cases. Okay. Let's go and have a look at some of the others. So that's on a non-log graph, it looks like that. Okay, but you see it's just a constant falling off in the rate. So as they get their R0 down, you go from nearly doubling the number of cases every 2 days to doubling the number of cases every 5 days, 7 days, 100 days or whatever it will be now, with the rate at less than 1%. That gives me my China forecast, okay, of deaths at 3450 as the S-curve flattens out, and cases at about 86,000. Let's go and have a look at Korea and places like that, because I think Italy has probably got worse. Let's have a look at Italy. So Italy was starting to be almost forecastable, with the daily rate falling as in those other graphs, but I think it's not going to look quite so good now. It doesn't look so bad. It hasn't changed it so much, so maybe the Italy forecast isn't too inaccurate still. But I'm going to modify that forecast later and put it on the web page. The South Korea trend, if I add some new points, there's a couple more points to add to the South Korea trend that I've just put in for those two WHO reports. Let's see if they're above. Yeah, they've gone up a little bit, but there's very little change in the South Korea trend as well. The South Korea trend is already quite consistent. So they may have got it under control. But as you can see from my forecast, they've still got a way to go from 4,000 to 10,000 cases. And for Italy, because the trend for Italy is not falling as fast. Okay, the Italy forecast actually, you know, we're at 3,000 or whatever we're at now. It's still going to go to 18,000 cases because there's still that very fast linear increase to come. Even though the rate of change is falling, the number of cases are increasing. So, you know, a smaller percentage of a larger number of cases, you're still getting a big increase per day, several hundred per day in Italy, probably for the next fortnight. Okay, and topping off maybe at 18 or 19,000. As I said, I'm not really going to look at much of the rest of the world. Let's have a look at, this was Hubei province. This was in its first 10 days or so. This is the rest of the world, and this was South Korea, which, as you can see, has already gone off the exponential trend and is going towards being an S-curve. So I'm going to add some points to this one. I'm going to add a few points to South Korea. So we're on point 55 now. And I'm going to add the rest of the world. And you'll see, I think, that the rest of the world is still quite close to an exponential trend, unfortunately. Okay, so remember, this is Wuhan. This is what happened in China in the first days. Let's actually add a few to that as well, so we can compare. The rest of the world is really in a very close to exponential trend right now. So let's select data for the China takeoff, as I called it, at the end of January. Let's add 2 or 3 points to that. Okay, so I mean, the rate of change in the world now, percentage wise, is as you can see, and in terms of actual cases, is very similar to Hubei province back at the end of January. This is the end of January, this is the beginning of March. South Korea is beginning to flatten out, so it's no longer really exponential. And even China was a little bit less than exponential, but the world, the rest of the world, that is, outside of China, is almost exponential still. When you look at the gradients of these, the 0.3366, remember that if that's 0.7, it's a doubling in a day. 0.33 is about doubling every 2.5 days. 0.24 here is a doubling every 3 days for the rest of the world, and that's what we're seeing. And it's relentless. South Korea, 0.224, about a doubling every 3 or 4 days, but it's actually well behind that trend now. Okay, it's actually beginning to flatten off. It's gone into that kind of linear region where it starts to slow down. Okay, so if I were to plot South Korea, it's going to be starting to look like that. And I do have a plot of South Korea somewhere, so there's so many graphs on here now. I've got far too many, actually. Far too many. Korea South. Okay, Korea South, let's see what that looks like. Korea South. And I've got several points to add to this. So you can see it's actually starting to look like an S-curve now. Of course, they could have another outbreak. There's no guarantee that this S-curve is actually going to work. But you can see their new daily case has already peaked, which corresponds to the greatest slope on the actual total cases graph, because you're adding the biggest number in a day. This is the daily data, but it's beginning to roll over a little bit. But as you can see, at 6,000, I was saying it's going to go another 4,000 or 5,000 before it rolls over to 10,000 or 11,000, maybe 12. But you can see again, the actual number of new cases per day is decreasing, and therefore, of course, the percentage of new cases is going to be decreasing also. These were the new cases. Okay, this is just the new cases. So you'll see on this one now, the new cases are declining. So I'm going to add another 5 points to this graph now, and then that's probably going to be it for today. The rest of the world is doing way worse than anywhere, actually, than China, sorry. South Korea, yes, okay, you've had a peak in new cases, but it's declining. It is declining, but it's not declining by that much. You're still in the 400 to 600 new cases per day region. I don't think there's any graph that really fits that, to be honest. But in terms of percentages, let's have a look at the explosion of cases. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, 53. This was a different 55. This was a different kind of graph. This was the percentage of new cases per day. And I've taken this trend here for my forecast, actually. Let's have a look where my South Korea forecast is. My South Korea trend is that part of the graph. When it began to stabilise and fall, it falls in an exponential decay. And that's good enough for a forecast, I think, for about 11,000 cases, or 10,000 maybe for South Korea, if they're lucky. Germany is, as I said, going exponential, so is France, so are a bunch of other countries, so we're going to have to try forecasts for each of those individual countries, and that's going to be very, very tricky and long-winded to do, because you cannot forecast the total world number of cases now, because this comprises of a bunch of different countries. This was just China. It wasn't easy to forecast China until you got to about here, that you could forecast that it was going to decline. This one could go anywhere. I mean, it could go into the millions, it could go up to the roof. So that's my little broadcast for today, my semi-live broadcast, very spontaneous. I should be putting some of these graphs onto the website at COVID-19 stats.blogspot.com. No hyphens in there, no spaces, just COVID-19 stats.blogspot.com, and I hope to see you there. I hope to see you on the next video. So for now, bye bye.